Okay, so apologies that I didn't network. I've got a bit of a cold. You probably noticed from the croaky voice, so I don't want to give anyone any germs, any unwanted germs. So I would have otherwise been networking with you. But thank you very much for coming out. It's important that we build up the WordPress community to pre-COVID levels. We were doing 60, 70 people before COVID hit. So 2.5 years, kind of the community has kind of dwindled away, and it's a new community now, which is you. So thanks very much for coming. Yeah, there was 60 RSVPs. So we're currently running about 75% of RSVPs don't show up. So yeah, it's because it's free. That happens when you have free events. Okay, I want to thank our sponsors. So we have Kinetics, WP Engine, Plesk, WordPress, and Microsoft. They each put money into the pot, allows us to get pizzas or give us the venue like Microsoft for free. So if you can, visit their websites and have a look at the services that they offer. While we're here, we have a website called WPAustralia.org, and you can find all the different WordPress meetups that run across Australia. But more importantly, you can join our Slack group. So we have a real-time chat. We don't do any work, we just hang around and chat each day. You can find us on Slack. So if you go into there and then join us on Slack, it's got instructions on how to join our Slack group. It's one of the best places to ask for help. You know, if you don't know any WordPress developers or designers, go into Slack. There's lots of channels. There's channels for plugins. There's channels for WooCommerce. There's channels for job posting security. It's not as active as it was before COVID, but in general, someone will probably get back to you. That's where all the developers and theme devs and business people kind of hang out on. That's what it looks like. Just a fancy IRC, fancy messaging app. Next month, I'm going to be doing WP hosting and migrations. So delving a little bit deeper into the actual hosting plans, what they are, and how to move your WordPress website from one server to another. And I'll go through all the details for those next month. But this is what you're here for, WordPress for beginners. It's quite a long session, so I'll try and go through it a little bit quickly. If you've got some questions, feel free to ask me or ask me at the end as well. But I've tried to cover a large swathe of WordPress. It's quite large. So I'm just touching on what I think are kind of the most important parts that a beginner would want to know. Okay, we'll start right at the beginning, is choosing a domain name. A lot of people get a bit flummoxed over domain names. So let's have a look at some of the important things that you should consider. First of all is what we call the TLD or top level domain. This is the .com, .com.au, .eu, .sydney, all those types of things. That's the first thing you kind of think about when you're looking for a domain name. .com is the most popular. Everyone kind of thinks about .com first when you ask for someone's website address. But you know, .com.au and .au, they are Australia specific, so they are worth considering for those. If you're looking to get a country specific like .au, you're going to need an ABN or an ACN as part of that registration process. You can get .coms, no problem without that, but most country specific things like UK, Ireland, most countries will require some sort of company registration, and it requires an ABN or ACN. You can get your own top-level domain if you want to pay $800,000. BMW have one. They went through that. It cost them close to $100,000 to get their own top-level domain. It's kind of out of the budget for beginners, but I thought I'd mention it. Why not? There's also other ones like .sydney, for example, .net, .io. There's real no downside for getting these other domain names. You'll probably find if you're looking for your specific name, it might be taken, or the name that you want might be taken as a .com. So you might have to consider looking towards, getting another type of domain like .net or something like that. So, have it in your consideration pile. Think about the name as in the relevancy as to what you're selling or what you're producing or what the blog's about. Bazinga, that might be your name that you've chosen, but it doesn't really tell people, what you're actually doing. It's not good for SEO either because it doesn't really mean anything. Nerd Shop, so in this example, we're selling nerdy ties. So Nerd Shop is better than Bazinga. But it's not really specific, Nerd Shop. What does it sell? It could sell anything for there. And then the last nerds.com.au. Now you probably focus on the last for nerds if that's your shop selling ties, but that might be taken. So you might have to think about, looking around that maybe not the .com.au, and maybe go for like a .sydney or something else like that. But relevancy in the name goes a long way for SEO. Last one is pass the radio test. So the radio test is when you don't see the domain name, but you hear it, either from somebody, you're telling somebody your domain name over the phone or over the radio. They've got to be able to then go to a web browser and type it in. So some things that you should avoid, things like number collisions, where you hear 4, for example, AVS 4U. Is that FOR? Is it FOUR or 4? And that's the same with like 2, 1, and 8. If you've got that in your domain name, if you're listening to that in the radio, you don't really know what to type in. It could be any of these. So try and avoid that sort of thing in your domain name. As well, abbreviations. So these are real cover with 2 R's. If you heard that in the radio, you'd have no idea it's 2 R's. Drop counter, they removed the E for whatever reason. It still sounds the same, but you wouldn't know the domain. Exchange is a common one as well. Again, the radio test, you wouldn't know how to spell that. You wouldn't know that an E was missing. Hyphens, because if you're trying to tell someone what's your name, or you got an advert on the radio, say, going for affordable term gear, go and visit affordable-long-term-care-options.com. It doesn't sound very good. So try and avoid long hyphens. This way. Last one is unintentionally inappropriate domains. A little game here. I'm going to show you the domain name. Can you guess what the company name is? I can see some people laughing, so I know what you think it might be. That's IT Scrap. This one, it's rude, but it's not rude. It's who represents. Yeah, I'm not going to even say it. Pen Island. That's one of my personal favorites. Speed of Art. American Scrap Metal. American Scrap Metal. And my favorite is this one, which is actually Swissbit. But .ch is the top-level domain for Switzerland, and that they're based in Switzerland. But it's something to consider when you're looking for domain names. Point this way. I get asked a lot of times, should you do have www or drop the www? If you don't have www, it's called a naked domain. Nothing rude, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter for SEO. It doesn't matter for anything else, from a technical point of view. It's just a choice. In the past, it was www for World Wide Web, but most people know that nowadays. I tend to just drop the www and just go for the domain name. It's easier. It's less for people to type. Any question?
If you do have it or you don't have it, and somebody types it in with the opposite what you have, they will still go to your website?
If you set it up correctly, so this is in the DNS records. If you choose naked, then in your DNS records, you'd have a www, and then you redirect that to the naked domain. So it doesn't matter what people type in, it'll still redirect to that one. But it's important that you do that redirection. So it's important that you choose one and not just leave both, because if you have both, it's going to show as different sites in Google Analytics. So you'll get analytics for www, and you get analytics for mydomain.com. So make sure you do that redirection, or ask your web host to do that for you. Oh, there we go. Where to register? There's heaps of registers. If you're going for a .au or .com.au, you're going to have an Australian registrar. So you can usually only get country-specific domain names from from a registrar that's authorized in that particular country. So, for example, if your target audience was in the UK, you can't get .uk through Ventra because they're Australian. Maybe, well, you probably can, but you probably have to register with a UK one, and the same for Australian. So .com.au and .au, you need to go with an Australian registrar. .coms and other ones, it's a bit of a free-for-all. I would suggest, if you don't know where to go, start with Ventra IP. They're a really good local Australian company. That's kind of what it looks like. You click on domains, you put in, you can either specify the name with a top-level domain like .com, and it'll tell you. If you just leave it blank, it'll go through variations that you can have for those, and there's heaps, and it'll tell you the prices, if it's available, if it's taken or not. So it's a good place to start for domain names. Okay, so we've done domain names. Let's talk about choosing a web hosting provider. Again, lots of options out there. It gets very confusing for beginners sometimes. In general, there's lots more, but in general, there's 3 types of web hosting accounts that you can get. They are shared. VPS stands for Virtual Private Server, and then there's Managed WordPress. So in general, for shared, it's bottom of the pack. It's your cheapest stuff. So we're thinking about $5, $10 a month for that. The reason it's so cheap is that they stuff hundreds of websites on one physical machine. So if you imagine your Mac or your Windows in a folder, maybe your My Documents folder, you can see all the folders you got in there. That's basically what they do in the web server. Every person's website is in a separate folder, but it's on the same physical machine. So they're all vying for the same resources, the same memory, the same CPU for that. So it tends to be rather slow because it's just the one machine spread across all these different sites. In general, and I know it's not all the case, in general, you get kind of poor support for shared hosting because it's an afterthought for them. You know, it's the cheapest solution. They don't really pay much attention. It's a box solution. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, well, just reboot it or something like that. And it's easy to get blacklisted. So if you imagine 200 websites on the one server, if one of them is doing some malicious stuff, like sending out spam emails, or it becomes part of a botnet because somebody got hacked, then it's easy for that machine to get blacklisted. One machine, one IP address, that IP address gets blacklisted, all the sites on the server get blacklisted. It's up to the host to try and get that unblacklisted. So that's happened a lot to my previous client. But, it's the cheapest option. So I understand if you're a beginner, that might be where you have to start if you've not got the budget. The medium one is VPS, so virtual private server. What this means is you've got big servers underneath and they spin up a software version of a computer, basically. So it's got its own RAM, its own CPU for that. So it's got that dedicated resources just for your web server because it's pulling from the actual hardware under. Now these can be cheap to medium because you get to configure the machine. So if you want one CPU, if you want just 2 GB of RAM, that's the kind of lowest spec, that can end up being reasonably cheap. Or you can scale up. So the more money you throw at it, the faster the machine is. You may want 4 cores, 8 CPUs, maybe you want to run 60 GB of RAM on it. Of course, that's going to cost you lots more money, but you can scale that up and down. So it's very flexible, VPS. However, it comes with no support. So in general, so you are basically looking after not only WordPress, you're now looking after a web server, the web server security, PHP, MySQL, all the services that come with the server, its operating system, that sort of stuff. So it's a big jump from just looking after WordPress. You can get managed VPSs, but of course they're extra money. So they could throw in an extra $30, $40, $50 a month just for them to look after that particular machine for you. So again, options. It does require high skill and quite a lot of time because as well as WordPress, you're managing that private server as well, unless you go for the managed route. But it's very flexible. The third one is managed WordPress. This is a relatively new thing, maybe in the last, 6, 7, 8 years. Whereas the whole web host, that's all they do is they manage WordPress websites. So all their hardware, all their software is tailored to optimizing WordPress, securing WordPress, getting the fastest WordPress sites out there. They also look after your WordPress website as well as the hosting. You don't have to worry about the hosting, that's all done. But they will look after your WordPress core, your plugins, your themes. They'll update stuff. If things go wrong, they'll roll it back. They generally have lots of support for developers. So be able to clone websites, link into things like GitHub, all that lovely stuff that developers like. They've usually got very good support as well. So give them a phone, you get to actually talk to an engineer rather than, be diverted off to someone with a book that says, have you rebooted this and have you tried that? They're very fast as well because everything's optimized just for WordPress. But they're expensive because it's a managed service that they offer. So that's at the high end, but it's something worthwhile considering if you are spending lots of time managing your WordPress website. Sometimes to get the best return for investment out of your own time, you got to pay a little extra money. So in general, those are the 3 types of web hostings that you can get. This is something that I always show to people. This is it goes for web hosting, it goes for web design, it goes for any type of things. You can't have good, fast, and cheap, and that's not possible in the middle. You've got to choose 2. So you can have fast and cheap, you can have good and fast, or you can have good and cheap. You can't have all 3, unfortunately. It just doesn't seem to work in the real world. Here's some web hosting choices. They're kind of listed from the cheapest to the most expensive, kind of. So things like Crazy Domains and GoDaddy are right up there at the cheap option. You're talking your $1 hosting a month, $5, $10 hosting a month, but you get what you pay for in these certain circumstances. Some better but still shared options are SiteGround and Venture IP. And they kind of venture into a little bit of the managed WordPress hosting as well. So there's a little bit of overlap there with more money. Looking to do VPS, virtual private server, Vultr or Linode. Again, you're kind of on your own to spin up machines and configure them by yourself. And then at the other end for the WordPress hosted is Kinetics here in Australia, WP Engine and Flywheel. So WP Engine is a big American hosting, but they do have offices in Melbourne. And you can choose a data center here in Sydney. I say /Flywheel, they bought Flywheel a few years ago, but it's still operating as a separate entity. But again, WordPress managed hosting and Kinsta as well. So those are at the high end, WordPress managed, but you do get what you pay for in these circumstances. So there's some good options for you if you're not really sure where to start with hosting. Okay, let's get on to WordPress, which is why we're here. So what is WordPress? WordPress is essentially a collection of files and a database. So as in files, it's an application. It's an app. It runs on a web server. The language is PHP. You don't really need to know that if you're a beginner, but basically, WordPress is a collection of all the application files. It's a collection of the theme files. It's a collection of all the asset files that you upload, things like images, videos, documents. So it's the file stuff that sits on a file server. But a lot of the content that you put into WordPress is actually stored in a database. So WordPress is files and a database. There we go. It's a little bit more technical, not too technical. So if you're a beginner, you can probably understand this. So you're typing in somebody's domain name, goes to a WordPress site, finds the correct PHP file, a template file. It runs that through the web server, which then compiles it to HTML. But in order to do that properly, it probably needs a lot of database, and then squidges it all together and spits it back out to your web browser. We call that a dynamic page. That's roughly how WordPress works. So WordPress is a content management system. What does that mean? It means that it has a login to protect your system. So a lot of the things that you probably want from a system, you don't want to build, you don't want to hire a developer to build. These are kind of common within content management systems. These are common things that a content management system will do. So it's got a login, which means it's got a user, you need a username and a password to get in. So that protects your content, so no one else can kind of just come and update it. It's got a block editor and editor, so it's easy for you to write your pages, write your blog posts. There's an editor there with formatting and that sort of stuff. It's got themes, and we'll touch on some of these later in the presentation. So themes customize the layout and the appearance of your content. Plugins extend the functionality of WordPress, what it offers as a core. User roles, so you can have different types of users, changing the different types of content within WordPress. It's user-friendly out of the bag, but you can extend that with plugins. It's got a media library to organize all your files, your images, your documents. It's got the ability to schedule content. So if you're writing blog posts, you can write 5 or 6 and schedule them for weeks ahead, and it does that automatically. It's got options for backup and security, and things like responsive design. I put that in. It's not really a thing now. Everyone does responsive design. If you don't know what that means, it means that your theme works on a mobile, tablet, and desktop. It kind of scales up and down. So all this, it gives you, as a CMS, content management system, basically allows you to create a website without having to write any code, which is what we're looking for here for our CMS. So that's what WordPress gives you. There's 2 flavors of WordPress. Some beginners get a little bit confused about this. WordPress.com is a product. It's a SaaS product. So it runs the WordPress app, but they offer hosting for that hosting and packages. So you sign up and you pay WordPress.com. Well, actually, you can get a free account, and your account is WordPress.com/whatever your name is if it's not taken. And that gives you a free WordPress installation, but you've got to use the WordPress.com domain name, and it's very basic. So if you want things like your own domain name, you have to pay them $5. If you want to remove the little bit of advertising that's in there, you have to pay another $5. If you want access to the big set of plugins, you pay them another $5. So it's free, but then you have to start adding on different things if you want to build out and scale out your WordPress. So that's a paid service. Versus the one that most people go with when they're starting up a company is WordPress.org. And WordPress.org is where you download the WordPress app as a zip file, and then you can upload that to your own web hosting. So that's all. It's yours, completely yours. It's nothing to do with WordPress.com. It's completely yours, and you look after it. It's your responsibility. So 2 versions there. I generally just deal with WordPress.org, so people's own self-hosted websites. Okay, so installing and configuring WordPress. It can be a bit confusing for beginners to know exactly where to start. So, but cPanel and Plesk make it really, really easy. If you don't know what cPanel and Plesk are, when you purchase a web hosting account, I would say maybe 90% of the time you're going to see one of these flavors. All it is a graphical user interface that allows you to manage the different options of your web server and your web hosting account. So you may see things like domains and DNS, you might see email, you might see database, PHP version. You'll probably apps. Okay, so these are one-click installations, and you click on WordPress or Joomla or whatever you want to do. In this case, WordPress, and it runs a script that installs things like the database and downloads the WordPress version, installs it all for you as much as it can without you having to manually set it up yourself. So these are great for beginners. If you're using one of these scripts, you'll probably see something like this. So at some point, it will ask you for the site name, site description, and if it's a multi-site, which you don't need to know if you're a beginner. So you put in those, then it'll ask you for a username. So username, password, and an email address. Some tips is don't use the word admin for your user administrator. The long story is, a few years back, people were using these scripts. It used to install WordPress using the admin user. So it just asks you for a password. And because WordPress, the basic WordPress is only covered by or secured by a username and password, you're basically giving the hackers a 50% chance of getting in because they already know your username. So we always avoid the word admin, but just use something different. And use a really strong password as well. And the great thing is these little so it can tell you how strong it is. Try go for 100. 100's the best. You don't want a weak password because hackers and bots will probably guess that. So it's a really easy way to install WordPress. Come on. There we go. If you don't have any of those little scripts, sometimes you don't, there is a manual way of doing it. So you have to set up the database user, connect that to WordPress and configuration file, download it, blah, blah. So I've got a video in the presentation here in the slides, which I'll release on the meetup page. So if you don't have that icon, then this takes you step by step through how to set up WordPress if you don't have that available to you. It only takes 5 minutes. It's really, really easy to do. Hopefully this isn't going to play. There we go. So once you have installed WordPress, the next thing to do is jump into the WordPress settings and configure it. Because out of the box, WordPress is probably kind of a default vanilla installation, and you want to set it up particularly for your own instance. So the first thing you do, WordPress has lots of settings. About, I think there's 6 settings in the dashboard. So after you've logged in, the first thing you want to do is go to settings in general. In here, you can, again, review the site title and tagline and change those if you need to. But more importantly, you want to set your site language. It defaults to American English. I always like to change it to Australian English. You get a little bit of Australian slang in there. But more importantly, you want to set your time zone. It defaults to UTC, so Universal Time. And if you're going to be scheduling content like blog posts, you want to make sure it's scheduled at the proper time. So you definitely need to come here and set your time zone. So definitely do that. There's also options down below to set your date type and time, but time zone's a big one. The next thing is permalinks. If you don't know what permalinks are, they're the user-friendly URLs that you see at the top. A lot of installations for WordPress default. So you'll get your domain name / P, which stands for post. Everything in WordPress is a post, whether it's a post or a page or attachment, it's called a post. And the number there is the ID of the post. Every post has a unique ID. It's not very user-friendly. It's not very SEO-friendly. It looks awful as well. So you really should change that. You've got a whole heap of options there. You can have your own custom structure at the back where you can drag month, post ID, category, that sort of stuff. But for 99% of all my installations, my client installations, I have it as post name for that. So that's the name that you give the page. It's the name that you give your blog title. Then WordPress will make a unique, nice URL out of that. So you definitely don't want the plain one at the top. It's rubbish. And the reason you need to do this after you install WordPress is if you go down 6 months down the road and you've not got it properly, if you then change over your permalinks, then that means that Google's already mapped all those URLs. If you change those, then you lose all that SEO stuff. Okay, so it's important that you get the permalink structure correct from the start. Don't panic if you have to do that. You can map all those over using a redirect, but it's a bit of a pain to do that if you've got hundreds of blog posts. The next one in settings is reading. So in here, there's two important things to look at. By default, when you install WordPress, it will come up with your latest posts as your homepage, because WordPress was developed as a blogging platform, so it wants to show your blog posts. But most people nowadays use WordPress as a company website or something else, or product websites like that. So you really probably don't want your blogs on the homepage. You want a nice homepage telling people what you do, being able to redirect to all the areas of your website. So the best option is a static page. That's just a page that you've set up on your website. If you don't have a web page set up already, go and create one. Just call it home, save it, and then come back to here, and you'll find it in the list there. And then you want to create another page. It's called blog or my blog or something, and set that to show your blog posts on. Okay, that's again that sort of configuration is what I have for 99% of all my websites. If someone's doing a pure blog, they might want your latest post on the homepage, but most people would benefit from a page, even if it was a blog website, because you can tailor that for SEO. So homepage, static page. The other one is discourage search engines from indexing the site. If you had a developer or a theme person create your website, they could have had the website on a server, and they've checked this box, so that when Google comes along, it says, oh, I don't want to index that because it's just under development. Sometimes people forget to uncheck that, and then they've got the live website and they're wondering, why are my pages not coming up in Google? Because if you look at live website, that's check that's going, no, I'm not going to index you. So make sure that is unchecked in your live websites. Media as well. So WordPress, when you upload an image file, it creates 3 default thumbnail sizes. So at 150, 300, and 1024. Just check with your theme. Your theme documentation should tell you what size it uses for things like featured images and for thumbnails, and you can tailor that here. If you don't need any of those, so just say you never use a 300 medium size theme, you can set those to 0 and 0, and WordPress will not generate another file, which will save a little bit of time, save a little file space as well. Okay, last thing to do, site icon and logo. This can get a bit tricky for beginners. So when you go into WordPress dashboard, you see the settings. Most of the stuff most of the settings in WordPress are there, but some are missing. I don't know why, but they are. So if you want to change the site logo and the site icon, which is a little icon that appears in the browser tab when you got that open, you need to come to something called the customiser. The customiser was launched about 10 years ago. It's a kind of separate area for configuration. I don't know why there's 2 configuration areas. It sucks sometimes, but this is the way it is. So you can only change the logo in the customizer. So when you're in the dashboard, come to Appearance and Customizer, click on Site Identity, and then you'll be able to upload a logo and a little favicon as well. Just to make it even more complex, and I'll go through this in another slide. If you're using a block theme, now block themes are new, and I'll explain what they are in a little bit. If you're using a block theme, so 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, which are some of the default themes that come with WordPress out of the box, the customizer is not available to those themes. So this is the appearance widget is an editor. Okay, so the customizer is not there. You'll be like, how do I change my site icon? Well, you click on editor, and then template parts, and then header. Boom. And then it opens up, this is the block editor. It opens up the header site, because the new block editing introduces something called full site editing, and I'll go into a little bit later. But basically there you can drag a block and then upload your site logo. If you site icon. So it's a bit of a convoluted way of going around it, but that's the way that the block themes are being developed at the moment. So that's how you change it for those two particular themes. Okay, I'm good. Okay, posts versus pages. People, when they first load up WordPress, if you've not had a website before, they get a bit confused about, when should I use a post, when should I use a page, what are the differences between those? Here's a little bit of a summary. So for content, posts are usually what we call dynamic and timely. So you're writing a blog post about an event or something that's happening now, which it might not be relevant in 6 months' time, for example. So posts are usually associated with a date or with something that's happening in an event. Whereas pages, they're generally static. So pages are your about, your services, your products. So you'd fill that out and then it kind of stays like that until you have to go and update it again. For organization, posts use something called categories and tags, and we'll go into those a little bit later. Those are not used in pages. Pages only use hierarchy. And what we mean by that is a URL structure. So /courses, course 1, that sort of thing. You don't have a category or a post or tag for pages. As far as visibility, posts appear in feeds. So we're talking about here like your homepage, if you set it to show the blog. We're talking about the blog archive, category archive, tag archive, RSS feed, that will all show posts. Pages don't. So if you want to see a page, you visit the URL, or you link to the page via a menu or another link from a page or a post. Comments are usually allowed only on posts. Pages usually don't have comments. You can force it to do that. You kind of force WordPress to do anything. But out of the box, you just get comments with posts. You get no comments with pages. And as the URL structure we saw in the previous one, posts can have kind of complex URLs because we're talking about categories and tags and maybe time, maybe folder, whereas pages generally have a really simple URL like /about, /store, /products, that sort of thing. So here's some examples. So you use posts for writing, blog updates. Here's an example. So /blog, which is your main blog page. And then we've got category, red wines, 2023 Margaret River best Merlots. So we can see here that URL is complex. The post it's complex for that because it's got lots of stuff in there. And for pages, they tend to be pretty static. So /about, and then again, I've got an example here: courses, beginners, digital marketing for beginners. Now these differ. So for the blog, if you were just to red wine, you get a list of all the blog posts that have got red wine in that category. If you do, you just get that one page that's got the beginners. You don't get all the pages relevant. So categories are association, tags and association. Pages are just like one page. Okay, talking about categories and tags. Here's the difference. So these are called a taxonomy. It's a fancy word for saying things that associate with each other. The categories are your broad level. So in the example before, we talked about red wine. Okay, so the blog post generally would be about red wine. So that'd be your main top level category. You only really tend to want to have one category per blog post. You can have more, but it kind of confuses the structure a lot. So you tend to just have one big category at the top that would cover that blog post. So it's the main classification. Categories are hierarchical as well. So you can have a category within a category. So you might have red wine. You might want to have a subcategory with that, Merlot, Shiraz, that sort of stuff, and then have your blog post there. So think of categories like your book chapters, the big ticket broad category classification. Tags, on the other hand, you can think of those like your specific words, your specific keywords for that particular post. So going again to the Merlot one, those are the three: Margaret River, Merlot, and 2023. That's what the kind of the main keywords are from that blog post, and it would allow someone, if they're searching by tags, to kind of focus in on that content, specifically. So content tags are not hierarchical. There's a flat structure, and they're like a book index. So you're looking for the words rather than the broad chapter. Here we go. Homepage settings. So we had a brief look at that. In fact, I think I covered that. Yeah, so I covered that. So static page, it's good for SEO if you have a static page rather than just your latest ones. But you should come here to the home page and just make sure that those are set up properly as part of the settings. Media library. So WordPress does have a media library. To be honest, it's a bit pants. It hasn't been updated for many, many years. It's not fancy. It's probably lacking. It needs good update. I think it's on the card for the next few versions. You can manage your file assets, so images, documents, videos, and audio. I would suggest that you don't upload video and audio to a WordPress website. Use that somewhere else, like Amazon S3 or Google or Drive or something like that, because it takes a lot of processing for your web server. You want your web server as fast as possible. Or use like Vimeo or YouTube or something like that for videos. But you can upload images, docs, videos, and audio. You can view things as a list. You can view things as a grid. It's got some bulk edits, so you can choose multiple images and then edit things. You can delete multiple things as well. Believe it or not, you couldn't do it years ago. You had to go one by one, which is a bit of a pain. WordPress automatically stores your files in a kind of year and month folder structure. So on the file, it's /wp-content. It's in an uploads folder, and then it has the year and then a month. So if I was to upload something today to my WordPress website, it would be in 2023/08 because we're in August. If I upload next week, it would be in 2023/09. And so that's the way that WordPress organizes its own media files. If you go to settings media, you can change that, but unhelpfully, it just throws everything in the uploads folder. So I don't know which is the best. I quite just like the one for year and month. At least I can find stuff relatively easy. For images, when you click on an image in the media library, you get to choose text for SEO, give it a title, caption, description, and it tells you the URL as well, where it's stored if you don't really know where it is and what to find on the disk. There is a little image editor that comes with the file manager. It's not great, it's pretty simple. So you can crop, rotate, flip, scale, and change aspect ratio. That's about it. It's nothing fancy. So it's nothing like a Photoshop or anything. It's just really, really quick things that maybe you forgot to do on your desktop. Let's just do it quickly on WordPress. Okay, menus and navigation. Menus. There's two parts to menus. So we're talking about classic themes here. And again, apologies, I'll explain the difference later. So if you're looking at menus, so there's usually a couple of places, and this is all driven by the theme. So when a theme developers create a theme, they put like container areas for where navigations should go. Usually you'll have a primary top. You'll usually have one at the footer as well. So you can come into WordPress settings, go, and then you can look at where the locations for the themes are. This one here has just got one primary menu, and it means at the top. And then you can select a menu that you have developed from here. And this is the edit menu one. So it's pretty simple. You give a menu a name. You can have as many menus as you like. And then at the left-hand side, you basically drag your pages, you drag your posts, you drag your custom links, categories, or whatever you want across, and you build out your menu. You can drag, and that becomes a child, a submenu. So when you click on the navigation, it kind of drops down into the submenu. So you can have 3 or 4 of those submenus for those. But that's basically how you build the menu structure. And you click on one of the menu items and you drag it up and out. It's a drag and drop system for those. So build your menu structure, save it, and then go back to the manage locations, and then you'll be able to pop that menu into that location. So you'll have, let's say, a top menu, you have a footer menu, you might have 4 footer menus at the bottom, depends on the theme. So you develop a menu for each of those, and then you drop it into the managed locations, and it'll just appear in that location in your theme. Here we go. Okay, block editor. Okay, before we get to block editor, so WordPress for many, many, many years used something called the Tiny MCE, or what they now call the Classic Editor. It's basically like a Word document. So you have this one big area, and then at the top you have for paragraph, bold, indent, bullet points, but all your content was in that one big kind of field. As of 2020, when they released the block editor or thereabouts, they then moved that classic editor plugin out of the WordPress core and into a plugin. So if you like that, if you've used WordPress in the past and you still want to use that, you can install and that overrides the block editor. You can continue using that style if that's what you're used to, if that's what you like. Oh. I don't know what that was. There you go. But WordPress now, so if you install WordPress out the box, you're going to get what's called the block editor. It used to be called Gutenberg editor. Gutenberg is the internal project name they've given to particular phases of development for WordPress, but they've settled on block editor. The whole concept of a block editor is you have these blocks of stuff. There's two types of blocks. There's structural blocks, which are your columns and rows, and there's content blocks. So that could be a paragraph, a header, a quote, an image, a featured image, a WooCommerce product, and you drop the block editor. And the idea is that blocks stack on top of each other. But rather than stack from the bottom up, you're stacking them from the top down, because that's the way that the web page renders. Okay, so you're kind of hanging blocks beneath each other. But you can move them around. Blocks of settings, so you can change all the different things. So for paragraphs, you can indent, bold, all that sort of stuff. Headings, you can choose H1, H2, H3, all that sort of things. So the blocks come on the side. You can group blocks together. So you can group several blocks together as a group and then move that as well. And you can actually save grouped blocks as what they call a pattern and then reuse that somewhere else in your WordPress website. So a little bit more advanced editor than before. The classic editor was like a WordPress doc free-for-all. This one is more structural. It takes a little bit more getting used to, but you know it's good once you start to use it. You can really appreciate the different types of blocks. And new blocks are being created all the time. And when you install a plugin, you'll probably find that it'll come with a few blocks as well that you can do. So that's a new editor, block editor. We'll talk about users' roles and capabilities now. So we touched on that when we were talking about CMS. So when you use WordPress, you log in. So if you log in, you have to have a user. WordPress comes with 6 users out the box. The top one is only for multi-site. It's called a super admin. So they have control of the whole network of websites. But for the basic WordPress installations that you'll be installing, there's 5. So administrator, they have full access. They can install plugins, delete plugins, themes, edit code, all that sort of stuff, what you need to manage the WordPress website. Editors, you think of it as like a newspaper editor. So other people contribute stuff and then they can go and edit their own posts, but other people's posts and publish those, make them live. An author, they can only write, edit, and publish their own posts. So if you've got multiple people on your website you creating stuff, then they can only basically edit and publish their own one. Then you got contributor. So contributors can create posts, but they can't publish it. So it'll be up to the editor to then review that and publish it. And then the lowest one is a subscriber. Subscribers can only really read posts and leave comments. That's all that they can do. Roles can be extended. So you'll get plugins, for example, WooCommerce. They install a customer and a shop manager. A shop manager is kind of just below administrator. It's kind of in between administrator and editor. So you don't have to give shop managers full administrator control of the entire website if you just want them to manage things like shop products, invoices, and things like that. Here's a good tip. Don't give everyone an administrator role. A lot of people do that. It's easy. You know, where's this? I can't find that. I'll just give them an administrator role. But you're basically giving them the full keys to the whole website, everything. So they can delete plugins, install plugins, do everything. So if you've got other people that are logged into your website, make sure you've got the correct level that they need to do. Don't give them admin access. A quick thing about capability. So this is the way that the user roles levels work. In WordPress, there's a whole list of capabilities. It's the capabilities that allow that user to do what they can do. So for example, the administrator has everything checked. But if you go down to the bottom level, subscriber, you'll see that they only have one capability, and that's read. That's all they can do. Contributor, they can delete their own posts, they can edit posts, they can read posts. And then author, you can see there's a little bit more stuff in there. They can delete published posts, their own published posts. They can edit their own published posts. They can upload files as well. And just another example of the WooCommerce customer. It's basically a subscriber, so it's got a couple of extra things that WooCommerce installs. So the ability to view your account information and view past and present orders. So that's the way that WordPress kind of defines how users can do things. And again, themes and plugins will usually add their own for that as well. There's links at the bottom. There's links in the speaker notes as well if you want to have a look online for extra information. Right, what are themes? Okay, the purpose of a theme, and we're kind of going back to classic themes, so before 2020, the idea of a theme is that it just styles all the content. So way back in the slides, I said that WordPress was files in a database. Most of your content that you're typing in WordPress is actually stored in a database. Okay? So when WordPress renders that, makes that page an HTML page, it's bringing stuff out of the database, your content, and then it's using the theme to style and design it. So themes style the content, themes specify where the layout of your content should be. Sometimes they might introduce some functionality. There's some big themes out there like Astra, and they come with customer testimonials and products and all that sort of stuff. But most themes are fairly basic, and it's just styling the different pages. So you'll have a home page, you'll have a different style for the single post, you have a different style for the categories archive, the tag archive, stuff like that. So that's what it's doing. It's taking the content and it's stylizing it. So we're talking about colors, fonts, sizes, and layouts. Generally, themes don't change, have nothing to do with content. That kind of changes with block themes. So here we are, at last, the types of themes. There's 3 general types of themes for WordPress. There's what's called the classic theme, and these were just called WordPress themes before 2020, before the new type of theme was released, but they're now called classic themes. Mostly a mixture of free and paid. There's hundreds of thousands out there. They're easy to use because you can install a theme, see how it looks, and uninstall it, install another theme, and it kind of wraps around your content. So it just changes the style. That's the whole idea about themes, is you can kind of hot swap them in and out and change the style of your website. 2020 changed all that. So 2020, we kept the block editor and became block themes. Block themes introduced this new idea called full site editing. Before that, if you were to change the header or footer or the single page or category archive, that's all generated with the PHP template that comes with the theme. And if you wanted to change that, if you're not a developer, you can't. So you'd have to hire a developer, hire a theme developer to change that to what you wanted it to be. You can change the styles, the design, but you can't change the major layout of that. So that's what a classic theme is. So the full site editing, which came in around about 2020, that now allows you to design the header, the footer, the main content of the entire WordPress website, okay, without having to hire a developer. So this is a new thing that WordPress has put in. It's relatively new. It's changing, but this is allowing people to not go in and pay a developer, not having to buy a page builder, and being able to design a little bit. Excuse me. And breathe. I only lasted 3 kids' books last night. Talked to its son's bedtime, so I'm doing pretty well. So the FSE, it's evolving. The user interface is changing. It's a relatively new thing, and it only works with these block themes. Because WordPress has these 2020 themes by default, if you install WordPress, you're going to get one of these block themes. Okay. Now you can uninstall that and install a classic, and it still works the way WordPress used to work, if that makes sense to you. There's another type of theme. It's called a page builder theme. So page builders kind of evolved before block theme, before the full site editor, and they allow you to change the header, the footer. They've got drag and drop widgets for customer testimonials, sliders, all that sort of stuff. So they're very, very popular. But now that the block editors introduced full site editing, it's kind of encroaching on their territory. So you've got the classic themes, which you need a developer to change the styles. You've got the page builders, which are mostly paid if you want the full capability, and they allow you to change things like the header, the footer, and different things like the archives. But now you've got this new thing called the block the full site editor, which allows you to do that, but doesn't have quite the amount of functionality as a page builder does. Okay? So that's the three general types of themes, and it depends what you really want to do as to which one you want to go with. At the moment, page builders are the most popular. Because this full site editing is relatively new, and it's kind of lacking in what you can do, most people still want that flexibility to be able to add things like carousels and twisty accordions and things like that, which comes with all the page builders. The full site editor is not there yet. Okay. We're almost done. Where to get themes? The free ones, you can get WordPress.org/themes. There's tens of thousands of themes there. You probably only want to look back a couple of years, maybe 3 years to get the best ones because they get outdated. For paid ones, generally ThemeForest is a really good place to go to. They've got a huge selection of paid themes for there. The paid themes are usually a little bit more advanced, a little bit more graphical, being done by a professional designer for those in general. And for the page builders, I put a couple of the top ones there. So there's Elementor, which is probably the top page builder, and then close behind is Beaver Builder for those. And that's your drag and drop builders. They do have free versions, but the free version, you can't change the header and the footer. You can only change the content in the middle. So it's not released as a full site editor. So you want to pay them, basically.
What sort of price are they?
Yeah, good question. I think I pay $40. And Beaver Builder is roughly the same, about $50 US dollars.
And that's just a one-off?
Per year. So you pay per year. You can still use it after the year, but you don't get access to the updates, which you really kind of want to get access to. There are others out there. There's Breakdance, there's Oxygen, there's Divi, which is older. There's WP Bakery, which is even older. But those are the top two page builders. So if you're going to start from new, probably have a look at one of those two. Yes, sir.
So if you go and post on GoDaddy, then you still need to pay $49 for the Elementor?
Yes. Yeah, if that's what you want to do. So
they don't offer a bundle. They don't have a bundle offer sort of where they can give you this suite of WordPress, post the website, and you get the Elementor or whatever the themes you want.
not as far as I'm aware. They might do, but not as far as I'm aware. So places like Elementor. Sorry, the question? The question was, if you go with GoDaddy or Crazy Domains, do you get like Elementor and all these premium plugins? In general, no. I know that some host providers bundle commercial plugins together, but for the examples I put that there, I don't think they do that. Elementor, they have their own host. So if you're looking at Elementor, you can actually buy a hosted plan, and they will throw in the web hosting plus an Elementor license for that, which might be an option. Beaver Builder doesn't do that. So these are commercial plugins, stand on their own. You pay per year.
But once your website is designed and it's up and running, then you do not require this, and you don't have to pay $49 each year.
You don't have to, but what tends to happen is with Elementor, because I use Elementor, I'm part of the Elementor group. Sorry, the meetup group, nothing to do with Elementor. If you stop paying the pro license, you actually lose the ability to edit and add new pro items. Okay, but for all of these, if you don't pay, you don't get the updates. And if a vulnerability comes out and you don't have the update, then your website could be susceptible to getting hacked. So in general, you kind of commit to that and commit to that yearly price. Okay, similarly, plugins. Plugins, they extend the core functionality of WordPress. So WordPress out of the box does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't do everything. So for example, you get plugins like WooCommerce, gives you an online shop. Gravity Forms gives you a form system. WordPress doesn't come with any form system. It's got format, it's got comments, but there's no form on there. LearnDash, for example, you can offer online courses. MemberPress, you can then build a subscription site, a paid subscription site. RankMath allows you to perform SEO functions for your posts to help it rank higher up in the search results. And that's just a snippet of plugin. So the WordPress core offers stuff. It's a CMS, allows you to edit posts, edit pages, but that's it. It allows you to build a website, but not an e-commerce website or a Learning Dash website or something like that. So you're going to need plugins to extend things. I get questions to say, how many plugins is too many plugins? There isn't really an answer for that. It depends on what plugins are. So you can get a little plugin that adds a one toggle to a particular admin interface, or you can get a plugin like LearnDash, which is like an entire online courses. So it depends on what the plugin does. I have a question.
Yeah, what are the most basic must-have plugins in terms of security when you set up the site?
Yeah, I should put I don't think I have. No, I don't. I should put a list of core plugins. It depends on what you're building, and everyone's got their own favorite types of plugins. But in general, you need a form plugin, because you want to build your email list. You want people to give you feedback and comments on that, so you need a form one. So WP Forms, Ninja Forms, Gravity Forms. Security is a good one. So you have some sort of security plugin. I use WordPress for that. You're going to want some sort of backup plugin because WordPress doesn't do any backups on its own. Your web post will probably take backups, but you can have a backup plugin. And so the whole suite of things. I've got a whole list of plugins. I might share that in one other meetup. Yeah, well, WordFence has that whole suite. So it does things like it stops brute force attacks. It looks for malware. It enforces users to have a strong password. You can enable two-factor authentication. It's got that whole kind of suite bundled in. Or if you don't want something that does everything, then you can find a plugin that just does like one or two specific things. Like there's plugins that just stop email spam. There's plugins that just stop brute force attacks. So there's bundles and there's singular plugins. What I tend to say is if you're just using one or two functions from a big plugin, then it's easier just to install those separate plugins rather than install a big heavyweight plugin that you're only using maybe one or two options. An example of that might be Jetpack. So Jetpack is one of the top plugins. It's from Automatic, who are the people who manage the WordPress code source. Jetpack is their kind of commercial suite, and it comes with a whole heap of things. There's like 20, 30 different modules within Jetpack, from backup, security, SEO, a whole heap of stuff. But if you're not using all of them, then for me, I wouldn't see that as a point in installing that particular plugin, just to get maybe one or two features. You go with something separate. Yeah, great question. Where do you get plugins? The biggest resource is on wordpress.org/plugins. That's the main repository. Everything on there is free. Most plugins are freemium, which means they offer a free limited version, and then all the goodies are in the pro that you have to upgrade to. The other place to get plugins is from the actual vendor. So in this case, we talked about WooCommerce, we talked about LearnDash, we talked about Gravity Forms. You go to that particular vendor's website and download it from there. Don't download something that you know is from a vendor from somewhere else, because that's going to be a knockoff. It's probably going to have malware, particularly what they call null version. Null version, if you've not come across that term, that's when somebody offers a paid plugin or paid theme for nothing, for free. They're basically taking out the license key part and offered it. More often than not, it's got malware in there. So try and avoid that. Always kind of get directly from the vendor or have a look on the plugins. There's other plugin sites like Code Canyon that you can buy paid plugins from. But in general, you want to stick to one or two sources or go directly to the vendor to get that plugin. Okay, just a couple more. Security, it's a big thing. WordPress is very popular. It powers 65% of all websites that use a CMS. So we're talking about WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, that sort of thing. It powers 43% of all websites. So that's the top 100 million websites. So you know, almost half of the internet now. We talked about the old scripts. So because they use this admin username, you'll see a lot of hacking attempts. So if you install something like WordPress, WordPress comes with a login system. You leave that on, you come back a week later, and there's like 1,000 nightly attacks on your WordPress website, all using the username admin, and they're trying to guess the password. So that's why we don't use the admin. It's a vector. Plugins, if you don't update plugins and themes, plugins and themes are updated regularly because they find issues, they find bugs, they find vulnerabilities, and they get fixed. If you don't do that, then that vulnerability is documented on the website. And if you're not updating those regularly, then people could get into your website using that particular vulnerability. It's fairly easy to find out what plugins your website is running. You just look at the source code. In source code, WP content/plugins, it tells you the name. So you can find it that, you can find it the version. Hackers and botnets, they actively attack WP websites all the time. Let's say if you install any sort of security plugin and go to the log file, you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of dedicated hits per night. This is where the brute force spamming comes in. For example, WordFence, it has a look at, checks the IP address of the machine that's attacking it. If it finds it's attacking too long, it just puts it into a block list. And so that helps with that. But yeah, WordPress, it's got a big target on its back. So just be aware of that. If you're installing WordPress, security is definitely key for that. So I use WordFence. There's a few out there. There's iTheme Security, there's Security, but I've been using WordFence for many years, and I only use the free version, which works. So have a look at that if you don't know which other one to install. One thing I'd say, if you are installing WordFence or any other security plugin, you probably want to enable what's called 2FA, two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. So out of the box, WordPress just asks for username and password. Anyone can guess that. If you've got a weak password, a weak username, the bots are very powerful now. They're using AI to try and guess things. They'll try and guess, people's names, common passwords. Password 123 is still like the most widely used password. It's crazy. So that's the default. If you go into WordFence, allows you to enable two-factor authentication. What it is once you put in username and password, it asks you for something else. So in this case, it's asking me for my Google Authenticator token that I have on my phone. So the whole idea about two-factor and multi-factor authentication is you've got one other authentication device that the hackers don't. So even if they guess your username and password, they can't get the token on here because you carry it around with you. Some people have a little key fob. You've probably seen people in corporate, they've got a little credit card with the numbers spin around all the time. So it changes every 30 or 60 seconds for that. So it's near on impossible for them to guess that. I would say this is probably a must. Even if you think your website's just a blog, hackers don't generally hack your website for your content. I know it kind of sucks. You kind of think you're important stuff, but they don't. They're basically looking at it for a resource. So they'll install malware, they'll install cryptocurrency miners, they'll use it as a bot to attack other websites. So protect it, go and have a look and enable 2FA. It'll secure your website. You shouldn't get hacked.
How do you get to that? If you've got your website, how do you set that up?
That's in WordFence. That shows you exactly. It's a setting within WordPress. You go in there, you download the Google Authenticator or whatever authenticator. There'll be a QR code that you take a picture of. It'll give you a number. You type the number in, and that's you now authenticated.
It steps you through it.
It steps you through it. Yeah, step-by-step guide. Backups. So WordPress out of the box doesn't come with any backups. Your WordPress host will probably do backups. It's an insurance policy. I can't count the number of fingers and toes that someone's come up to and say, "Oh, my website's been hacked." I say, when's your latest backup from? Insurance is insurance. It's only needed when it's needed. You know, and you can go like 2-3 years without having a backup, and you never get hacked. And like, haha, I didn't pay all that money, and then you get hacked. You're like, bummer, I didn't pay that money. So I say many web hosts back up their system, but they usually back up like everything. So if you've got a web host that's also running email, for example, they'll just restore the whole shazam. You know, so you might lose emails and other stuff that you're paying the web hoster for. Might do it weekly. They might only retain 2 weeks worth of stuff, a month's worth of stuff, and you might have been hacked for 2 months, for example, and now hacked stuff. So you really want to take control of that and install a backup plugin, so you can have control over your own backups, your own retention period as well. Backup regularly. By regularly, I mean weekly, daily, real time. So if you've got a large website, say it's e-commerce website, you're doing lots of transactions every day, you probably want to be backup in real time. So you look for a real-time backup option. Don't back up to the same web server. So a lot of these backup plugins are free ones. Just create a file on your web server. If your web server gets hacked, then you can no longer trust that backup. Okay. So if you're doing backups offline, up in the cloud, somewhere else. So some popular backup plugins. WordPress. WordPress used to be a standalone plugin, then it was incorporated in Jetpack, and now it's a standalone plugin within Jetpack. It's a service, so you don't have to have any storage. They back up to their own server, so it's like a one-stop shop. You pay them a monthly fee, they back up the website. It can do daily, weekly, or real time. So it was a really good choice when it got moved in Jetpack. I moved, and now it's a separate game. Anyway, Updraft is a popular one as well. It's free and paid. So Updraft only backs up to your local web server, which is a bit sucky. You pay for Updraft Plus, and you can upload it to Dropbox, Amazon, all that sort of places. Same with WP Up. Same Blog Vault. Blog Vault is a service like WordPress. Backup Buddy, again, is like Updraft, so you get to choose where you want to back up. If you're backing up, make sure you back up all your files and the database as well. So you've got the two things there, because that's what WordPress is, it's files in the database. If you don't want to pay for the service, it comes with their own hosting, storage for the backups, then some of the other popular places is Amazon S3. So you set up a bucket and you update to that. Dropbox, you can use Dropbox for backups. Another one that's comparable to Amazon S3 but a bit cheaper is Backblaze. Again, these are like cloud storage areas, really, really low cost. I've got Amazon S3, I've got terabytes of stuff on Amazon S3, and I pay about 23 cents every month. So it's like a no-brainer for storage. A bit complicated to set up, but there's step-by-step guides online that show you how to set up a backup bucket for these different services. That should be it. You want to back up everything. Everything. All the files.
So if you don't want to store it in the cloud, can you store it on the folder on your own computer, or is that not what?
Well, it depends how you, the question is, can you store the backup on your own computer? Yeah. The problem is that your own computer is not on all the time. So how would you get the files from the web server to your computer? You could manually create a backup and then download them to your computer, but that's, it's a lot of time that you'd have to do that. So you really want a cloud storage solution and then link it with your backup plugin so it's pushing it up there every day. Updates. We talked about vulnerabilities. WordPress got a big target on its back. You want to make sure you're updating. If you're using WordPress, commit to updating it frequently and often. So weekly would be my thing. I kind of do it every other day for my websites. For big complex websites and for big updates, you probably want to test a copy of your website. Most web hosts offer the ability to clone your website over to a temporary address. So if you're running things like WooCommerce or LearnDash, and you get an email that says, version 5 is coming out, it's got thousands of new features, you want to start thinking as an admin, how's that going to then link in with all the other plugins that I've got? Okay, I need to make a copy and update it on the copy to see if anything happens. Nothing happened, fine, update it on the live. That's generally the kind of service that most WordPress managed hosts provide. They go a little bit further. They do things like visual regression testing when you go into these managed hostings. What they do is they upgrade the plugins. They take a snapshot before of a few pages on your website. They upgrade. Then they take a snapshot of the same plugins. If they look kind of different, they kind of roll it back. So that's some of the services that are included in these kind of WordPress managed hostings, and that's why you pay a lot more for them. But if you've not got that, just make sure that you know how to restore from your backups first before you do a backup, just in case it happens. When you're doing updates, you want to update in this order. Update the WordPress core, then update your theme, and then update your plugins. Here's how you do that. So on your WordPress dashboard, there's a dashboard link at the top, and then there's a submenu called Updates. When you click on it, you'll see at the top, WordPress. The WordPress core comes at the top. You've got WordPress, plugins, themes, and then translations. So it should tell you if you've got the current version, or to reinstall it again. So if something weird happens, you can always reinstall that WordPress version. But the WordPress update's at the top. Then underneath that, you'll get your plugins, then themes, and then translations. Translations is your language. So you can update them one by one if you have a complex website, or you can select them all and just kind of go for it, update them. There's software as well. There's services out there. So if you've got multiple WordPress websites, you're looking after client stuff. I know this is a beginner's night. But if you've got multiple websites out there, there's services like Koala Boss and Manage WP, where you install a little plugin, a worker plugin, and you add them to this other website that you log into, and then you can update the themes and plugins from there. And they've usually got services like backups and link checker, SEO, keyword tracker, that sort of stuff, if you're looking after kind of client websites. But just for WordPress, come into your dashboard, go into updates, and you can update all that stuff from the interface there. That was it. Wow, that was a lot of stuff. I know it took a long time, and thank you very much for your patience and for my breakdown 3/4 of the way through. Questions, and I'll leave my info on the top from there. Check them out.
You're talking about the theme before, and you sounded like you can, but what happened? The content, it will be like a mishmash or something. It's going to be a bit mess after you change the theme.
So the question is, if you install a theme, another theme, what happens to the content? So going back to the classic themes, these are the old type themes, they were built with the fact that it doesn't change the content. So it'll just look visually different. So your content will still be there, and it'll come in. It just, the header might look different, but your menu will still be there. Maybe your site logo is in a different place, but it'll still be your logo. Your blog posts will still have the title, the featured image, and the excerpt, but the way it's represented might look different. The featured image size might be different. The size of the title might be different. So essentially, the content is still there. It's just the style and design is changed. Now that's changed with these new block themes. So the classic themes used to have what we call a content visual separation. So the content's there, and then the style is there, and you can change the styles and the content doesn't. With these new block editors, the way that you're editing the full website, it's actually storing the design, the colors, the fonts, and the content all together. So it's not so easy to change block themes now. They're working on it. It's a work in progress. But to change one block theme to another block theme could alter some of the content that you've got within your website, because you're making changes to the structure of the website as well at the same time as the content. So that's 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, and all the subsequent ones there. But it shouldn't happen if you've got a classic theme. So should you pay extra for domain name security? You're talking about SSL?
Just the places where I'm buying domain names, they're asking for further security, allowed to pay extra.
Yeah. No, you should not. the SSL certificate, the HTTPS, to get a secure website. Maybe about 10 years ago, a few of the big companies, Google, Microsoft, got together and they founded an organization called Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt offers free SSL certificates for any company, anyone. So you shouldn't need to pay for a certificate. Essentially, in the past, when you bought an SSL certificate, people would ask you if you wanted to upgrade it, and you get different little ticks in the browser, like a green tick or a super verified tick. That's all been dropped now. It's just secure or not secure. Another thing that came with SSL certificates in the past was insurance or liability. So for example, if someone hacked into your website and you could prove that because their 512-bit key strength got broken, which was highly unlikely, and they would cover $1 million worth of liability. That was never going to happen. There's never been a court case. It was a big scam, basically, to get more money out of users, to scare them, basically. So if a web host is asking you to pay for an SSL certificate, you should, in my opinion, should go to a different web host. Good question.
So what was I asking there?
If they're asking you to pay for an SSL certificate, then go elsewhere because they're just scamming you. There's no need to pay. Yeah, and people will pay because they don't understand, unfortunately. Any other questions? All good? Okay, I'm going to wrap up tonight. If you want to talk, you can come up here for a little attentive because out for 8 o'clock. If you want to chat. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Take some pizza if there's still some pizza there. See you next month.
Thank you so much.